Hi YouTube, welcome to another edition of Horror Hands, and for this video we're going to look at the gruesome beginnings of Peter Jackson. So his two early gory movies, Bad Taste in 1987 and Dead Alive aka Brain Dead from 1992. Two awesome movies. We'll talk a bit about the movies themselves, what I think about them and their legacy, and how Peter Jackson has gone on to surprisingly bigger things over the years in Hollywood. So yeah, this should be an interesting one, so stay tuned. And apologies as well, it is stiflingly hot here in the UK today. I feel like a bit of a shaggy dog. Yeah, anyway, enough of that. Let's talk about some horror movies. So first up we have Bad Taste. Released in 1987, although this is one that Peter Jackson and his friends worked on at the weekends over the course of 4 years. And it's a real low budget affair. I forget how low budget the movie is, but they had virtually nothing to work with. But it's a real good example of effective resourcefulness and just pure movie making passion, even though it is presented in this just ultra gory, silly style. But filmed in and around Peter Jackson's hometown of Wellington, and as I say, him and his friends worked on it. They played roles in the movie and worked behind the camera as well. So this tells the story of this alien race who the new sort of cuisine of the galaxy is human flesh. And these alien creatures come down to Earth to harvest humans and yeah, sort of process them for alien consumption. And the government sends in the boys, made up of Frank, Ozzy, Derek, and Barry. Derek played by Peter Jackson himself, but we'll look at that a bit later. And yeah, they have to do battle stopping this alien race, and it is some of the most goriest, craziest things you'll ever see in a movie, and it's amazing. It is a quintessential must-see gory B-movie entertainment. And as I say, they had no money to work with. So for example, the weapons that you see in the movie, most of them were made by the crew. They were made from wood and aluminium, and even the sort of the masks of the alien creatures themselves were baked in Peter Jackson's mother's oven to give them the look that they had. So it was real kind of DIY horror movie making. I think they had about $25,000 to make the movie, but the New Zealand Film Commission did actually invest a considerable amount of money towards the end of the film's production. I think by that point they kind of thought, right, this is probably going to be released. So they did pump some money into the film, which may explain why it does look and feel a bit better than what its kind of no budget status would suggest. Because, you know, I watch a lot of low budget horror films, and a lot of them do look low budget. They literally are sort of filmed on camcorders in people's houses. But I've always thought that Bad Taste felt a bit of a step above those kind of movies. It does look good, and it has some wonderful cinematography, and it could pass as kind of a, not a budget horror film, but, you know, respectable horror movie for what it does and the way that it looks. But the crux of it, as I say, were very amateurishly made by Peter Jackson and his friends. But as I say, they all played roles in the film. Peter Jackson actually plays two roles in the movie. He plays one of the sort of alien worker drones that's out and about trying to kill the humans. And it's kind of a minor role, but he has some really cool things and really crazy things to do in the movie. And it's always synonymous for me of the scene with Peter Jackson as the alien eating the brains with the spoon, which is just crazy to think that is the director and would later be a big Hollywood player. But that's an amazing scene. And then he also plays the role of Derek, one of the boys that the government sends out. And again, it's a really sort of colourful role for Peter Jackson to play. He's sort of like the bumbling, clumsy one of the group, yet surprisingly resilient and very, very tough. I mean, his character in the movie survives a brutal fall from the cliff and smashes the back of his head, at which for the rest of the movie his brains are hanging out, and he's constantly scrambling around to get the brains back in his head. At one point he ties his belt around his head to keep his brains inside his skull. And it's an effect that, like most of the effects in Bad Taste, it's horrific. It's horrifically gory, yet so hilariously cartoonish at the same time. And they really nail those two dynamics throughout the whole film really well. Because it could very easily have gone in either direction. It could have been too much to have fully enjoyed, or it could have just been so silly that it just wouldn't have worked. But they really do balance the horror and the gore and the comedy and the silliness perfectly. It's a great example of horror comedy working. Everybody else does a great job in the movie. There's so many gory set pieces. I haven't got the time in this video to go through them all, but it's really worth watching to see them firsthand. There's a few disgusting bits as well, the puke bowl and things like that. And it is just, as I say, it is a perfect example of low budget filmmaking, just done incredibly well. The movie didn't do great upon its release. It didn't have the best reception, not surprisingly. It was actually screened at the Cannes Film Festival, but it didn't do very well at all. I don't think people were impressed by it. Would have been a very interesting experience to see that at Cannes. But yeah, it bombed there and later slowly started to get an audience and some recognition as it did the rounds in theatres and particularly home video. And I know that Kim Newman, the sort of famous horror critic, he was a big fan of this and sort of cited it as a really great example of, like I say, resourceful filmmaking and just entertaining B-movie horror. But yeah, Bad Taste, for me, I love the movie. It's absolutely crazy. It's very nostalgic because it's one that my dad got, and I watched it with him. And it was a good one to watch as a kid because, as I say, it has that gore and violence, but it does it in kind of such a sort of soft play style that it was a great initiation into that kind of next level gore. And my dad kind of, explained what it was and what it was like, and he made watching it a fun time, which was a great experience back in the day. And this is one that I've always been a fan of. So if you've not seen Bad Taste and you want a very, very entertaining, low budget, but surprisingly competent gore movie, definitely check this one out. But prepare yourself for the gore and some of the gross out moments, because it definitely delivers. And it's a shining example of a debut from a director and someone that certainly had hidden talent amongst the low budget and the lack of resources and money to do anything. So yeah, Bad Taste definitely gets the Horror Hands recommendation. Next up, from 1992, Peter Jackson brought us Dead Alive, aka Brain Dead, which is how I know the movie. It was released in the UK as Brain Dead, Dead Alive in the US. I still have the original VHS of Brain Dead that my dad got, so a very sentimental item for me in the collection. But yeah, Brain Dead was Peter Jackson with a lot more budget. This one had a budget of $3 million, and it shows. It looks a lot better. You can tell Peter Jackson's got a lot more things to play around with, and boy does he do that. He brings everything at you in this movie in grand excess. So again, filmed in and around Wellington. This is the story of Lionel, sort of a shy, reclusive young man who lives with his overbearing mother in this big mansion, and he ends up sort of getting involved with the local shop girl, to his mum's disliking. She's very overprotective. And she follows them on a date to the zoo, where she happens to stumble into this cage which is housing a very ferocious Syrian rat monkey, which bites her and infects her and turns her into a horrifying zombie creature. And in turn, that other people get attacked, and Lionel has to sort of try and keep on top of the situation by hiding them in the attic and sedating them and things like that. But it doesn't go to plan, and it is a total gory mess. For me, this very much has kind of like Reanimator vibes in terms of it's very gory and it's violent, but it's sort of like, let's try and make it as silly as possible. And again, it works. They balance the horror and the comedy perfectly. Gory beyond belief, but it's not a grueling horror film. It is cited as like the goriest horror movie ever made. I don't know if I personally agree with that. It's not the film that immediately comes to mind, just because, like I say, it's not nasty gory. It's so cartoonish and over the top. You have to just smile at it. I don't know how anyone could find it offensive or hard going, but it is scary in places, and yeah, there is moments that will make you wince, and in particular make you feel pretty queasy. So the pudding, the custard scene still gets to me. The blood and the ear in the custard. I challenge anyone to watch that and not just recoil a little bit. But at the same time, it's hilarious. So it's all really well done. But for this movie, they used 300 litres of fake blood, which is nearly 80 gallons, I believe, which I think is the record for the most fake blood used in a horror film. I may be mistaken now, but I'm pretty sure at least at one point that was the record for the most fake blood ever used. It's like the Wild Bunch of horror movies. The infamous lawnmower scene is just still to be bettered in terms of blood and splatter. But again, really good performances in this one. He handles kind of that mother-son overprotective element really well, and you feel for Lionel, the young man in it, and but at the same time, it is a very, very fun movie, and I still find myself laughing when he takes the zombie baby to the park, and of course it gets out and all hell breaks loose. Yeah, it's such a fun film, and again, this one's very nostalgic because I actually remember traipsing around town with my dad, who wanted to get this on video. We went to whatever shop it was at the time. It might have been like Virgin Megastores, and he was after this video and he got it. And I've never seen my dad more excited to get a movie. And yeah, we watched it, and again, just some horrific gore and things in it. I mean, the opening scene of the cannibal tribe decapitating the guy is pretty strong stuff. But again, I don't know, I just understood that it was a horror comedy and could see it for the fun side. And again, with Bad Taste, my dad made it a fun experience. So it's a very, as I say, almost a sentimental horror film to me in one sense, because I have such fond memories of discovering this and watching it as a kid with my dad. But Brain Dead, Dead Alive, it's another one that wasn't received all that well initially, but did do well sort of after its cinema release. It didn't gross much initially, I don't believe, but did get some good critical reviews, and again did well on home videos and with horror fans, and like Bad Taste has become an absolute cult icon, quite rightly so. But if you've not seen this one and you're a horror fan, I don't know how you couldn't enjoy this film. I'll say that about it. It has something for everyone, particularly gorehounds and zombie fans. It is just wall to wall, unbelievably gory, crazy action. Even thrown in a kung fu priest. So yeah, how could you not love this movie? But yeah, Peter Jackson does a great job. He shows that he can use a budget very effectively. Still has roots to Bad Taste. and those sort of the smaller acorn that he planted. It's a good sort of transition from that to a slightly bigger budget and even gorier movie, and they sit side by side very well, and they act as very good companion pieces. So yeah, again, Dead Alive, Brain Dead gets the absolute Horror Hands recommendation. So it would be remiss of me to make this video and not mention the fact that Peter Jackson went on to make Lord of the Rings, one of the biggest franchises in cinematic history. And it really is an incredible Hollywood trajectory. Kind of strange, but nonetheless incredible. I can't really think of anyone else that's had such a progression within the film industry. I guess the next one I can think of is sort of Sam Raimi, to start with sort of his 16mm amateur horrors and Evil Dead, and then go on to sort of the Spider-Man movies, and is now involved in Marvel. But with Peter Jackson, to go from Bad Taste to Lord of the Rings is pretty darn impressive. And credit to him. And interestingly, I hear a few people say how they can see inspirations from Bad Taste and Brain Dead. They can see that within Lord of the Rings. I myself can't. I have to say, I see nothing of Bad Taste in the Lord of the Rings movie, so I personally can't bring that discussion to you guys. But if you're someone that does watch Lord of the Rings and you have an example of things where you think that's definitely from Bad Taste, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear of any examples that you've noticed from those movies. But yeah, to go from these sort of humble, gory beginnings to what some people would probably say is the greatest cinematic movie in history is just incredible. And credit to Peter Jackson for doing that. He really nails different genres and has proven himself to be a very competent director in all arenas of cinema. But what's cool is Peter Jackson does still seem to hold Bad Taste and Brain Dead in good regards. He still talks about them. He even had the Syrian monkey crate in the back of the ship on his version of King Kong, which made me smile. And I did hear a couple of years ago that he was actually working on 4K restorations of both Bad Taste and Brain Dead. So yeah, credit to him for still thinking those movies are important to him and for wanting to get them out there. If anything, I just find it impressive that he can go from them to Lord of the Rings. But I think, if anything, one thing I would have absolutely loved to have seen on the big Lord of the Rings posters, I would have loved to have seen it say, from the director of Bad Taste. I mean, that would have just been unbelievably awesome. If any of them exist anywhere, they must be collector's items, because that would have just been too funny. So yeah, that's my little sort of reviews of Peter Jackson's early movies. I'm sure most people have seen them, but if you haven't and you are a horror and gore fan, you have to see them, because you're doing yourself a disservice by not seeing these two wonderfully funny, horrifying, gory movies. So let me know what you think of these, and if you've got a particular favourite. So thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.